Our next guest at DCC needs absolutely zero introduction, but I can assure you that Batman is very much real, and he's here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Conroy.
Thank you. Garamila Mahagud. Hey!
So, is anyone any questions? Kevin, welcome to Dublin Comic Con.
Thank you so much.
You've been here for a few days, you said?
Yeah, I got here about a week ago.
Just taking it easy?
Yeah, just hanging out in Dublin.
Where have you been? Any nice pubs? That's
few.
such an Irish thing to ask. Have you been to nice pubs?
No, just wandering around the city. Last time I was here, I drove all around the countryside because I spent a lot of time here when I was a kid. My grandparents are all from Ireland. I'm a dual citizen. And when I was a teenager, I did a semester at UCD one summer. So I spent a lot of time off and on growing up in Ireland. But as an adult, I hadn't been back in a while. So a few years ago when I came, I rented a car and I drove around the countryside. But there are these tiny, tiny roads in Ireland. And there are these rock walls on either side of them. And so you're driving on the wrong side of the road, I might add, on this tiny road, and there's a rock wall right next to you, and then a lorry comes at 70 miles an hour the other side. So I just close my eyes, and hope it passes. But so I decided this time I wouldn't put myself through that, and I just hung out in Dublin.
Yeah, I'm not sure the roads are much safer in Dublin city centre. Cyclists will know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got an Irish lineage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Irish.
Irish.
Only 100%.
Okay. Only. I mean, before we get to, we might get to Batman at some point. But before we get there, how did you get into acting in general? I know we'll all know you for your voice acting, but
Wow. How did I get into acting in general? Well, a lot of people always ask, how do you get into voice acting? And I always go back to that John Lennon line from that song, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. I didn't plan on going into voice acting. I wanted to be an actor. And I studied at Juilliard. Like many actors, I came from a family that was wildly dysfunctional. And when I was a teenager, my parents split up. The house was sold. So when I was 17, I was on my own. So I moved to New York. I got a scholarship to go to Juilliard, and I got my first apartment. The thing is, no one knew I was 17 because I was 6'2", and I had this really deep voice. So everyone just assumed I was like in my 20s. But I was very young, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I kind of, put my fate in the hands of God. And I thought, I'm going to audition for the Royal Academy, and I'm going to audition for Juilliard. And if I don't get into either one, then I shouldn't be an actor. And I got into Juilliard. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then they offered me a scholarship. And then they offered me living money. So they were really, they were being so generous, which was wonderful. And I just, worked my ass off.
You had some very illustrious company at Juilliard.
Well, that was the irony because I was dirt broke, and my roommate was a guy named Robin Williams. And Robin was the only person probably more broke than me. The two of us were stealing food from each other. That's nasty. No, he was a sweet-hearted angel of a person. He was almost too good for this world to hold on to. He was just such a sensitive, creative guy. But he was quite a bit older than me. He'd already been through college. He was about 22 when he started Juilliard, and I was 17. And that was almost a generational difference. He was having these tortured relationships with women, and I was popping pimples in the bathroom. We were at just different stages of our lives. But he was an amazing guy. He was an amazing guy. To watch him in a mime class or a math class was just you know, you knew you were watching someone in a whole different league. He was just such an incredible character actor.
When you left Juilliard, what were your sort of first roles, your maybe not breakthrough roles, but your first break-in roles?
I kept expecting someone to teach me how to act when I started out. And then I didn't realize you can't teach someone how to act. You just have to learn that on your own. So the first job I got the first big commercial job I got was the Broadway show Death Trap. You ever hear that show? It ran for years on Broadway. And I was the co-star opposite Brian Bedford. And we did the national tour, the Broadway tour. So we were, living out of trucks and buses and performing around the country. But Brian was a very brilliant Shakespearean actor, classical actor, and a real difficult taskmaster. And he made my life really brutal. I mean, if you weren't giving him 100% attention, he would go to whatever was. If you weren't being, acting's all about being, right? It's about behaving. It's about living in the moment naturally. And when you come right out of acting school, you're doing everything so theatrically. You're doing everything too dramatically. You know what I mean? You haven't internalized it all enough. You haven't made it your own enough. So I was acting. And Brian was looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? And I realized I had to just calm down and I had to make it my own. But Brian was such a brilliant actor that when he was on stage, he was being totally naturalistic. He would just, you know how they say the worst thing to be on stage with is an animal or a small child? That's because everyone in the house, your eyes will go to whatever's the most realistic on the stage. And if there's a dog sniffing around the stage, that's going to be the most realistic thing. So you're just going to watch it. Or if there's a kid playing with toys on the stage, you're just going to go, your eyes going to look to it. And if everyone else is acting up a storm, you're not even going to notice them because you're going to go to whatever's real. And Brian was so brilliant because he could be totally real on stage. Even when he was doing Shakespeare or when he was doing Restoration or Moliere, he could be so real. But if I wasn't being totally honest, he would go to whatever was being real. So I'm over there acting, and I'd look over, and he's on the floor going like this, trying to get a stain out of the rug. And everyone in the theater is looking at him, trying to get the stain out of the rug, and everyone starts laughing because I'm trying to get his attention back, and he wouldn't look back at me because I was acting too hard. So he was just being very real. And this war went on for a while. And I decided to do the same to him. When he had a long speech, I went over to a bookcase and I just couldn't find the book I wanted. And so he was acting and trying to get my attention in that piercing British voice. Oh, Clifford. And I just kept trying to look. I didn't give him my attention. And then finally I feel whack in the back of my head with his script. A book that he was reading. And he whacks me, and I turned around and I thought, okay, this is war. And this is opening night at the Kennedy Center. So I lunge across the desk to get at him. He throws down the book, and he lunges across the desk to get at me. And we're like going to kill each other. And I hear from the wings, gentlemen, it's the theater. It was the stage manager trying to get us to stop from killing each other. But, so I learned the hard way. You asked what my first job was. That was my first job. So I was learning by fire with Brian Bedford. And then I did some Broadway and some off-Broadway, and that led to television. And I was in L.A. Doing a TV series, a very short-lived one. And I had done voiceover work, commercial voiceover work, because I learned pretty fast that you can't make a living in the theater. You just can't. In the States, I don't know about here, but you can't. So everyone who works in the theater either does commercials or television or voiceovers or something. So I was doing commercial voiceovers. And I had a voiceover agent who said, look, they're doing a new show over at Warner Brothers. Why don't you go over and audition? It's a Batman. You've never done an animated role, but see if you can do animation. And I said, Batman? That's been around forever. That's not new. So I was so naive, I didn't even know it had never been an animated show. And so I walked in a complete novice. It was just an actor in a cold audition, the first animated show I auditioned for, and I'm meeting Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and Andrea Romano. It's like the royalty of animation. And I didn't know who any of them were, so I didn't feel any intimidation. And they said, what's your exposure to Batman? What's your background? Because they'd seen over 500 people at this point. They'd seen everyone, and they couldn't find the right person. And I said, well, I know the Adam West show from the 70s when I was a kid. And he goes, no, that's not what we're doing. We love Adam West, but that's not what we're doing. This is very dark. This is film noir. His parents were murdered in front of him as a child. He's lived his life to avenge their deaths. He lives in the shadows. He's got two personalities. I said, well, you're kind of telling the Hamlet story. This is a classic tragic story. And they said, well, give it a shot. So I just used my imagination in the booth. And I came up with this sound that to me just sounded very dark and like it was coming from that pain of his childhood. And they bought it on the spot. And that was 25 years ago.
I watched a lot of terrible cartoons and TV shows when I was a kid, but watching Batman, I knew, even when I was very, very young, I knew this was a really, really good cartoon. Even for, as a young child, I knew this was a great cartoon. It was so well written. It was so well animated. Did you know it was going to be so important? It's an important
You never know. You never know. You know how life is. You never know what's going to happen with a show when you do it. It's like when you start a job. You don't know if it's going to work out. You just show up the next day. It's just one day leads to the next to the next. And I think that what all of us underestimated was how Batman resonates with the audience, how he resonates culturally, what he represents. He's the one superhero who doesn't have any superpowers. All he has is his wits. And all of his goodwill is drawn out of this terrible pain of childhood. And rather than let that pain turn him into evil, like the Joker, he turns it into good. There's so much nobility in that people love him for it. People are passionate about this character. When I come to the Comic Cons and meet the audience members, they're passionate about Batman. And I used to wonder, what is it about this character that so resonates with the audience? And I had a young woman come up to me in Chicago, African-American woman in her 20s, and she said, "Can I just hug you?" And I said, "Well, of course." She said, "I've always wanted to hug you to thank you." I said, "Thank me for what?" She said, "Everyone I grew up with in the projects on the south side of Chicago is either dead or in jail." She said, and I'm not exaggerating, everyone. She said, "I'm a professional, and I have a life, and I got out because of you." I said, "Wait a minute." She said, No, I had you every afternoon to teach me what was right and what was wrong." I said, "Wait a minute. You got you out of the projects, and your mother, I'm sure, is the one who taught you the difference between right and wrong." She said, yeah, but she was working so hard, and I was alone so much, and you were my babysitter. You were the one, you were the role model." I thought, and I hear stories like that a lot. She didn't mean, obviously, me. She meant Batman. But I hear stories about that a lot, about culturally what the character means, what he stands for, what he resonates, how he resonates with people. And it's just so humbling to be a part of that, to be a part of that legacy of that character.
I think that people now, if you close your eyes and you think about, if you try and imagine Batman in your head, and some people will see Ben Affleck and some people will see Christian Bale, but for a lot of people in here, it's not about a look, it's a voice, and we all associate you with Batman. I mean, you're our Batman.
The brainwashing worked.
Yeah.
I'll take over the world.
I mean, I see Ben Affleck, but I hear you. How does it feel to be so associated with a character for so long, over so many series? I mean, you've got Batman, you've got the follow-up to Batman with Robin, you had Justice League, you had Batman of the Future, all that kind of stuff. How does it feel to be associated so lovingly with a character as big as Batman for so long.
It's amazing that this is the direction I was sent in life, you know? I mean, I was ready for it. I was prepared to grab it when it was going by. But it was just going by. I mean, someone was going to get that job. I'm just so lucky it was me. So, you know, I'm very aware of how lucky I am. But I'm also aware of how hard I worked to be ready to take advantage of it when it happened.
You've worked with a lot of great voice actors over the years on the show, but I think Mark Hamill, as your sort of the other side of your mirror, most people will think that was like one of the great.
Batty, you're such a nasty, nasty boy. Yeah, Mark. I wish you could see Mark in the booth. I was shocked when I first started working because my only exposure to Mark was Luke Skywalker, and he was wonderful as Luke Skywalker. But he's one of those actors who was a victim of his own good looks. When he was young, he was really good looking, so he only got young leading men, and young leading men tend to be pretty boring roles to play. Those are not the most interesting roles. The character roles are more interesting, and Mark, in his heart, is a character actor. He really is. He's got a crazy, crazy brain. He's got a crazy mind, you know. And you don't want to go in there, you know. And in the booth, when he gets behind the mic, it's like you just feel sorry for that mic because he looks like he's going to devour it, you know. He's like, oh, Batty, you know. It's like I don't know, Jim Carrey. His face becomes rubber. He really impersonates the Joker. He embodies the Joker, which is great. And I look like Batman, so we work out well together.
Is there any other sort of actors or voice actors that you worked with on the show over the years, either with Batman or Batman Beyond or on the Justice League? I know Michael's here today as well. He did the Flash.
What?
Michael Rosenbaum was the Flash on Justice League. He's here today.
I can't understand what you're saying.
Oh, my accent is terrible, isn't it?
That damn accent.
The Flash from the Justice League is here today as well, so I know you worked with Michael. Yeah.
Michael.
Is there anybody...
What you were saying.
Is there anybody else in particular over the course of the show that is particularly memorable?
God, so many people, because once word got out that we had this great show going on, back in 93, 94, word got out that there was this great, fun booking at Warner Brothers. Andrea Romano said she could get anyone in there. And she got, you know, Roddy McDowall as the Riddler, Paul Williams as Penguin. These are wonderful. Adrienne Barbeau as Catwoman. I mean, it was like every week another major person would walk through the door. Michael Rosenbaum is a wonderfully talented guy, and he's great at what he does. But there have been literally John Glover, who's a complete madman. He's a wonderful character actor, and he did so much. So there have been so many interesting actors in there that are... And it's something about being in a booth where you're not confined by your own physicality. You're not aware of it. There's something very liberating about, I think, only being able to use your voice. And it's fun to watch actors. There's a reason you become an actor. And I think the reason is often because as a child, you liked playing roles. You were more comfortable in a role than you were in your own skin. I know that was my case. I was a very awkward, nervous, geeky kid. I didn't feel comfortable as me. But when I got on a stage, even as a kid, I could be anybody. I could be Romeo. You know, I was so free. And I think a lot of people get into acting because of that. There's so much more freedom in the character. But then you deal with the business aspect of it, and it makes you so... It's like putting a straitjacket on you. You have to behave a certain way. You have to behave the way the business wants you to behave. You have to sell yourself. You have to audition. You've got to get the role. You're aware of the negotiations. There's all this other stuff that gets in the way of the child who loved to play. You know what I mean? Just like life does. But when you get into a booth, somehow, I watch this happen with so many actors, it's like the child comes out again. It's like all the crap of the business just gets erased because, they don't care how they look. They don't care what anyone thinks of the way they look. It's almost you can go more extreme with your voice than you could on camera. So I've seen some really wonderful performances in the booth, and I love doing it. I've become a much better actor since I've been doing just voice work than I was before.
One of those performances, you played both Bruce and his father, and you talked to yourself for quite a long time. Was that difficult?
It was an honor to work with such a wonderful actor.
How did you go about trying?
Both were nominated for awards,
How did you go about deciding what the difference between Bruce's voice was going to be and his father's voice was going to be?
Well, that's tricky. Because they had to be believably related, but slightly, subtly different. And actually, there was more than just Bruce and his father. There was Bruce and Batman and his father. And then there was young Bruce, because he has dreams of when he was a child. That's when he's talking to his father. And then there was drugged Batman, which is the voice which is the reason this dream takes place. So in that episode, actually, I was doing 5 voices. And it was a blast. Actors love to be challenged. It's just fun. And Andrea knows, I've worked with Andrea so long, and I respect her so much. The wonderful thing about Andrea, this is a little secret about Hollywood. Actors are generally despised. They think that we're overpaid, overpampered brats. That there's not a lot of respect for actors. Andrea loves actors. She understands how hard the life is. She understands how to talk to actors. But she also only surrounds herself, I've noticed, with generous actors. Actors are people. There are generous ones and there are selfish ones. There are kind ones and there are mean ones. They're just like people. She always picks generous, kind people who are... Mark loves when I'm good because he knows it'll make him better. And I love when Mark is good. I love watching him act because I know I'm going to be better because he's giving me so much. So when that energy is in the booth, it's just a wonderful, creative experience. So Andrea tends to surround herself with people like that. And although the industry has this attitude about actors where they're not generally liked very much, with Andrea, you know that you're loved and you're protected. And she has a way of getting wonderful performances out of people. She knows how to talk to actors. If you give an actor a line reading, you know what you want him to say and what you want it to sound like. But if you say, okay, say it like this, go home, you're going to hear back, go home. You're going to hear back an imitation of what you said. And it's always going to sound like an imitation of what you said. But if you say to them, all right, now, you're really angry at this person, and you want them to get out of your house, and you're desperate to get them out of your house, and you want to get them to go back to where they came from, go home! Then you're going to get, you're going to hear the passion behind it. So that's what she does with actors. She gives you the motivation for the line. She will never give you a line reading because it's the cheapest way to get a product. And it's the most direct way to get a product. So if all they're interested in is how much money is this hour costing us in the booth, which a lot of producers are only concerned about, they will give you line readings because they want to get on to the next one. But it just won't sound right. Andrea never will do that. She will always give you the motivation and let you get there and figure out how to get there. So she gets great performances out of people.
Before we throw it out for questions, you've had very recent success voicing Batman in the Arkham series of computer games. Do you find it's different, or is there much difference between doing that? Being given a single line to read over and over and over and over and over again.
No idea the can of worms you just opened. Acting school does not prepare you to record games. Games are everything I just described to you about recording in the booth with the other actors and the creativity and the give and take. Wipe it out. Because with a game, think about it. Every different algorithm of how the game is played, there have to be different takes. And each take has to be completely clean. So you have to be alone in the booth. So everything is created alone in a vacuum. And you're trying to keep the character alive, and you're trying to keep the motivation for each line, the situation you're in, and you don't know what the situation is, because it's Arkham Knight, the last of the Arkham series, had 37,000 lines of dialogue recorded. Can you believe that? I mean, it's like recording War and Peace. 37,000 lines. It took 2 years to build. Every 1 week a month, they would call me in and they'd say, okay, we have another bunch of pages for you. And I would do 4 hours in the morning, take a break for lunch, and then 4 hours in the afternoon. And it would be, okay, I'm in line 103, out of the Batcave. Okay, great. Can we do that with a little irony? Out of the Batcave. Okay, that's great. Keep the irony, give us a little smile. Out of the Batcave. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And 3 times each time. And then occasionally they'd say, okay, you're losing the Batman voice. And I'd say, of course I'm losing the Batman voice. I'm losing my mind in here. And that went on for 2 years. And it's just, like I said, they can't train you in acting school to know how to do that. But at the end of it, I look at the game, and I'm so proud to be a part of it because it's brilliant. I mean, those games are incredible. They're beautiful. But the actor's part in all of that is like, I don't know, drilling teeth. It's really unpleasant.
I'm so sorry for that question. By way of an apology, I'm going to open up questions to everybody else now, so I'd imagine there's a few. Okay, we'll start over here, I think. This guy here.
I was wondering what your favorite non-DC superhero is.
Are there any non-DC superheroes? Honestly, when people ask me what other superhero I'd like to play, I always say, what other superhero would I want to play? The great thing about Batman is he has no superpowers. He's the only one. He's so complicated. He's a guy with issues. He's really screwed up. But he compensates it for, he turns all that screwed upness and he makes something good out of it. That's what people love about him. And that's what gives an actor so much to bite into. All my actor friends are like, they hate me because they know I have the best role to play.
Okay, go there. I hate being so choosy here. There,
Thank you. Was it a great, because you just said about how with the video games, how you weren't prepared for it, was it great then to know that Mark was there with you, that at least you've got your Joker there?
That was the other thing. For the first 2 games of the cycle, he was. Well, but we're not together. We're separate. But I knew what he was going to do with it. But with the third one, Arkham Knight, he was doing Star Wars. So he was in London. I didn't even see him between takes or anything. So, but at that point, we both know what we're going to do with the role so well that I knew what he was going to do. And he knew what I was going to do. So there's a great comfort in that. But that's the thing. I didn't have my Mark in the booth with me. I was alone all the time. Yeah, he's my Mark. He's my bro. He's my bro.
Down the front here, I think. Yep, Jurassic
Back when you did the Fear the Grey Ghost episode, you were starring beside Adam West. Was there much tension playing with the former Batman, or was there a passing of the torch moment?
There was such a funny moment when I was so apprehensive, and he was so cool. I was the one who was so nervous, and it was my show, and he was coming in as a guest. And I thought, this is so weird. And I went up to him and I said, it's such an honor to meet you. I said, you're the Batman of my childhood. You're the one I grew up on. And I said, it feels kind of weird to be doing this. And he said, are you kidding? He said, I had so much fun. Go with it. It's yours now. This is yours now. Have a blast. He said, I had a blast. It's your turn. I mean, he couldn't have been more gracious. And every time I saw him after that through the years, he always had a big hug for me. And he's a really warm, generous, elegant man. He was a really elegant guy. He was a class act. There aren't a lot of those around. He was a very classy guy.
Sure, and then go back to...
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
My question's more so to do with Batman Beyond. How did you find transitioning from a more pivotal character, like in a main role, to being more of a mentor role, as opposed to, like, with Robin and Batgirl, I think it is, transitioning to Terry McGinnis in a completely different generation?
The question is how was it doing Batman Beyond, which was a role about 80-year-old Batman? It was a show about 80-year-old Batman. And he had this young friend who he hired, who was a peripheral character. Just kidding. Just kidding, Will. I love Will Friedle. No, it's a good question, because I went from being the center character in the show and the real, when you're playing the center character, you're playing the sort of soul of the show, it's following your internal life, the character you're living, and suddenly it's not. You're the peripheral character. So I had to look at Terry as a father would look at a child, and proudly watching his child take off. And watch him screw up over and over again. No, it was fun playing 80-year-old Bruce. It was fun. But that was the challenge also in doing the Justice League, because suddenly I was one of 7. So I'd only have maybe, instead of having, a whole show to show my emotional arc, I might have 5 lines to suddenly, and the tendency is to overact. If you only have 5 lines, you want to, really show who you are, and you can't. You've got to lay off it. You've got to just trust the audience will see it. The nice thing is by the time Justice League and Batman Beyond had come along, I had already been doing this role for 15, 16 years, in other incarnations. So I was well established with the audience. So I didn't have to do as much for the audience to know what I was feeling and what I was thinking. But it's interesting. You're right. It's an interesting question, because suddenly you're a peripheral character and you're not the central character. That's life. Life. What are you going to do? Hi.
Hi. I just have a question about performance. And I just wanted to know what kind of advice you have for young performers now entering an industry.
Wow. This industry has changed so dramatically. It is... Oh, what advice? The most important thing... Wow, there's so many important things. Acting is about being. It's about honesty and being in the moment. It's not about acting. It's about just being. And the better an actor you are, and the better a person you are, the more honest you are. the more in touch with who you really are. The more naked you can make yourself emotionally, honestly, the better an actor you'll be, and the more the audience will see your soul. And that's what you want the audience to do. You want them to really see your soul. And the only way you can do that is by exposing your soul. And the only way we can do that is by making yourself incredibly vulnerable. So an actor's journey in his career, if he's really working on it, is to become more and more and more vulnerable and more honest and less about the bull of the industry, the nonsense. Unfortunately, at the same time that you're growing in that direction of increased vulnerability, you're dealing with a business that is brutal, that is constantly selling you no, we won't hire you. No, you're not pretty enough. No, you're not this enough. You're not that enough. We're not going to give you this role. No, we're going to give it to that person. We're not going to give it to that person. So that the rejection is over and over. No matter how successful you are, you hear rejection over and over again. The only way you can live with that is to develop a skin of steel. You have to, or you crumble. So what I've just described is so contradictory. You're developing as a person to be more and more vulnerable, and yet you're developing as an actor a skin of steel to exist in this business that's really rough. The most successful actors I know, the most well-adjusted emotionally, the ones who deal with the business best, are the ones who accept that and don't try to fight it and understand that. Because otherwise you get into alcohol, you get into drugs, you get into, various ways to medicate your way through it. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. Most of the actors I know don't. That's just not, that's bull. That gets in the way. That gets in the way of me being able to show you who I am. And I think of those things as crutches. And my parents were alcoholics, and I come from a family of all that. So I have a good reason to not go there. You know what I mean? But it's a very loaded question you ask. Does that make sense? Sure.
We've got time for one or two more, so we'll go over this.
Sure.
Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you say something for me in the Batman voice?
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Thank you.
Can you sing the song that you sang to turn Diana back into Wonder Woman for a pig? No, I'm just kidding. Another question.
Am I blue?
Yes.
Am I blue? No, I'm not going to do that.
Well, I'll never be happier than I am now. Okay, one more question. I don't know. Yeah, there's a guy with him.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Hi, good to see you again. We
Hey.
met earlier. Hey. I also wanted to say earlier, you and Mark Hamill are the kings of comic book voice acting.
Thank you.
Wanted to say that earlier. So, what I want to ask is, over the years, you're working on various different productions. You've talked to people, of course, like Mark Hamill himself. You even talked to Adam West, Rest His Soul. How did it feel working with those type of people who did various things over the past, even before you worked in various productions together?
It's just, as I was saying, Andrea tends to surround herself with really good-hearted people who are great to work with. So I loved working with them. It's like a family. We get back together and you know how when you haven't seen a sibling in many, many years and you get back together and it's like the conversation just picks up again, like you just saw them last week. That's what it's like with a lot of these actors. There was one actor once one that sort of got in. And I'll never forget this. We waited for her, and we waited for her, and we waited for her. And after 2 hours, we just thought, look, we're just going to record the show. And we just recorded the show without her. And she shows up just as we're finishing. She walks and she says, oh, I'm sorry, I just couldn't get out of the house today. Andrea comes over to me and she says, couldn't she lie? Couldn't she say that she got in a terrible car accident? Or she couldn't get out of the house. She never came in again. She was never used again. So, you know, that kind of selfishness is just not put up with. So that was the great thing about Andrea. She didn't put up with that. So.
We'll do one more.
Yep. The young lady in the fifth row. There you go.
Thank you. First of all, Mahu, on your use of Irish, that's well done. And also, I just had a question. When it was brought up, you acting as both Thomas Wayne and Bruce Wayne, I just remembered an episode where you played both 80-year-old Wayne and I don't know how old he is, like 20s or 30s.
Right.
Like younger Bruce Wayne.
Right.
So I was like wondering, what do you think was the biggest difference between old and young Batman?
Well, that was the episode we were talking about earlier, where I was playing 5 different roles. The biggest difference was I found younger voices, aside from being slightly higher in pitch, just because as life goes on, you tend to go, your voice tends to go down. There's a certain energy to younger voices. Do you ever notice how fast kids talk? They talk so fast they stumble over their words. So aside from being slightly higher in the register, there was a lot more speed to the way he was talking. Just like, oh, Dad, I want to do this. Dad, I want to do that. Dad. And he'd be like, Johnny, you're not going to do that. There was a lot of rendering of voices. I always tell this to actors: doing voices isn't about making funny sounds. It's about embodying the character. And a lot of embodying the character means, how fast are they? How fast are they thinking? How slow are they thinking? How painful are they? How joyous are they? You know what I mean? It's acting. Voice acting is acting, but you only get to use your voice. So it's all about embodying the character. So the difference between younger and older voices, to me, tends to have a lot to do with pacing. I just think young people talk really fast, and older people tend to be more deliberate in their speaking. So aside from vocal register, I slowed him down. So, yeah, right there. You. This is your life.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Hi again. I was going to ask, with Mask the Phantasm coming on Blu-ray, what was your experience too? Because when it came out, it was sort of it was released on Christmas Day, bombed, but over the years on DVD, it's just
bombed
and grown. So what was
that
that
wrong
like?
word.
I think that's the best Batman movie ever.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But just what was it like? It was just growing in popularity and just more people returning to it and discovering it. What was that like?
Well, you never know how things are going to grow. I mean, we all know that The Wizard of Oz is one of the great American classics that's shown every year and everyone loves. It bombed when it first came out. It bombed. It disappeared. No one knew what it was. The Munchkins? It was weird. No one knew quite what to do with it. It was only over time that it became a classic, and people realized how wonderful it was. That's the same thing with Mask of the Phantasm. It did okay when it opened, but it was over time. I beg your pardon. But over time, it became people's favorite Batman movie because people started looking at it and saying, this is a great movie. Because what it does, any Batman movie, the thing that I think is so wonderful about the character, as I was saying earlier, it's his internal journey. It's this painful internal journey that this man goes through, and without any superpowers, he turns himself into a superhero. Well, you see all of that in Mask of the Phantasm. You get the whole backstory. And you see the whole genesis of the character. And then he falls in love. And he realizes what life has to offer. He realizes what love has to offer. And he knows that he can't have that life because he's owned by this vow that he's made to his parents. And so to me, the greatest scene in that movie is when he's at his parents' grave and he's begging them, please, please release me from that vow. I found this wonderful woman. I want to have a normal life. And instead, this wave of bats comes screaming up out of the earth to reclaim him. It's so dramatic. He knows he can't escape his destiny. That's the tragedy of the character. It's a wonderful movie. I love that movie.
I think we'll do one more, and it's this guy here because he's had his hand up for about since before Kevin came in. So this is the last one, unfortunately, guys.
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you, Kevin, for dedicating so much of your life to this iconic character.
Oh, thank you.
And doing such an amazing job. You are Batman in my eyes, and you recently said that, not to start any big arguments, but that Ben Affleck was getting a good balance in live action of Bruce Wayne and Batman.
I think he did.
I'm just wondering, would you be open to featuring in a cameo or hopefully even a larger role in one of the live action movies down the road?
No. I would never accept a role in a live film. Are you kidding? Sign me up. Of course, I'd love to.
And also just wondering, of all the wide range of episodes now, what's your favorite episode or film that you've worked on as Batman?
I think Perchance to Dream and also Dreamscape, both of those, because they go into the psychology of Batman, you know. Those are beautiful stories, and I think they were really good stories. But visually, I think Sub-Zero, some of the artwork in Sub-Zero is beautiful. The opening scene, I don't even remember that movie, is a shot under the ice, and you're seeing polar bear prints racing across the ice over your head because you're underwater. I mean, how wild is that? There's beautiful artwork in that one. But no, I think my favorite episodes were Perchance to Dream or Dreamscape. Those two.
All right. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I get your warmest, biggest round of applause for Mr. Kevin Conroy?
Thank you.